This is a 2012 Mercedes-Benz C63 AMG Black Series. You can see it's in white. There's only 16 of these in the United States. Now, my customer, my client, purchased this on Bring a Trailer for nearly $200,000, and it was delivered here. Now, my job is to make this thing look absolutely perfect.
Better than perfect.
Even better than the pictures online. So today we're gonna be going over the step-by-step process. If you purchase any car online, how do you bring it home and make it look absolutely fantastic? Today on this episode of Drive and Protect. Clearly, this car is not in terrible shape, but again, it's all relative. The fact that there are less than 20, I think, made in this color, I don't know the exact number, so leave a comment below because we're struggling to find out just how many were produced in white. But anyhow, at $200,000, it's not where it needs to be for my client. Stay tuned to the very end to check out when we drop this off at his collection and pick out the next detail coming into the studio. Absolutely insane. You're gonna wanna check that out. Step one is pretty obvious. Have your local dealership or your trusted shop change all the fluids no matter what. You want to be 100% sure on the date change, the type of fluid used, and of course to double check your powertrain in the process. After that, it's now detail time. So my step number one is to power wash the dust and the light grime from the transportation, meaning moving the car across the country, just to see what I'm working with. Now, the reason I do this first, meaning rinse first before pre-foaming the paint, is to give the next step, which of course is the foam gun, the best chance possible to utilize the soap's encapsulating features. So I quickly pre-rinse the paint just to knock off all the easy stuff, then I let the soap work on the harder grime that the water pressure alone won't remove. Next, I filled the foam cannon with ammo foam and did the same thing in the bucket. Now, you'll notice if you're running low of foam in your bottle, I sort of developed a reminder sound as you squeeze the bottle when you're really low on product. Same thing as when your brakes squeal when your brake pads are really low. Kind of funny. Then I foamed the paint, used a blue microfiber wash towel and a delicate brush for the emblems. For those of you keeping track, I only use multiple blue thick microfiber wash towels to clean the paint and not a wash mitt because you remove any chance of sort of micro-marring the paint or swirling or scratching when you reuse the same wash mitt all the time. Instead, I use multiple microfiber towels. With the paint now dry, I lifted the 63 up, removed the wheels, and focused on the suspension and calipers. Working like a team. Besides allowing me to inspect the brake pads, condition of the struts, ball joints, caliper condition, etc., I like to remove the wheels to inspect the hubs for rust or oxidation.
That's why we need to clean it. That's why it's hard to get off.
Just to be clear and to avoid any confusion, I'm hitting the rubber, meaning the tire, and not the wheel with a sledgehammer. Do not hit the wheel with a sledgehammer. Next, I clean the suspension, not just to make it look great and shiny, etc., but to establish a baseline for any future leaks, seals, or gasket damage, and so on. It makes it easier to spot any drips starting from a clean slate. Also, it's a good idea to remember to ask your mechanic to re-grease the suspension when you're there getting all the fluids changed. Likewise, keep everything written down in your glove box or on a mobile app like Driveo or Autorist. For the strut and caliper, I'm using Ammo Plum Wheel Cleaner, which is an alkaline-based cleaner, so you're not gonna have any acid damage in the process of cleaning, and it also works great on oils and greases based on its higher pH level. Once everything is clean, it's a good idea to take a look at all the components just to make sure everything is in good shape. Now is the time to catch anything that might be an issue later on down the road. You have to remember, we have no history with this car, so you really can't vouch for, yeah, that's normal or whatever. You haven't had any seat time in this brand new car to you. So looking at everything could be helpful if you do feel that something doesn't quite feel right later on. Underneath the car, I did the same thing. I inspected everything, power washed the spider webs, again, just to establish a baseline. Once underneath was all good, I put her down and inspected the paint thoroughly with a scan grip light and a paint depth gauge. Okay, at this point, I've cleaned and washed and dried the car. So now we have a surface that's pretty much virgin, meaning there's no dirt on it. I don't have anything distracting my eye. The next thing I do is I run over here and I shut the light off. Now, again, we're filming, so I gotta leave some lights on, but the idea is to have minimal light and then use just one in your hand, and then you're going to adjust the light in your head to be able to see directly into the reflection. So as I'm going through the car, you can see a few spots here and there, but immediately I stop right here. You can see these two little dots, these two circles right here. That is called denibbing. So basically from the factory, they got a little bit of dust in there and they sanded it down, but they didn't finish the entire process. You're never gonna be able to see that on a normal car, especially one that's white. It's perfectly blended, but by doing this process, I know that I'm not gonna leave this behind because now I'm responsible for how this is gonna look when it goes to the client, meaning Dominic. So I'm looking right now, this here needs to be probably sanded with 3000 and then finished out. And then I go on the trunk, make sure I pop it open. On a car like this, I'll actually smell the interior. It's brand new, it's got 6,000 miles. You can smell a Mercedes.
If you've ever smelled an E39 M5 when it was new, that's it.
You can just smell that a Porsche is a Porsche. This one here, totally Mercedes all the way. And then I'll go in and I'll look at the seams, very critical. Because if there's anything wrong with any of the seams, you can find rust in here. You can see if there's any repairs, and you wanna feel it with your hand. Because a lot of times there'll be overspray or an extra layer of paint. And this looks absolutely perfect. It's exactly what the customer wants. You see these marks? That is a leftover glue from the clear bra removal. Now I read the description on Bring a Trailer and it said that the previous owners removed the clear bra. My guess is because in 2012, 13, or whenever they put it on, it's just old glue and it probably turned yellow, so they removed it. Next step, like I said, is just inspect the car, take 10 minutes, make your customer happy. I also really like to inspect the door jambs and under the door itself, which is a hot spot for rust and corrosion, what we call the armpits of the car. Very important to look at these areas. Next, I repeated the same steps on the interior, the seats, the seat belts, floor mats, and so on. Now, I can feel most of you watching this saying, this is insane, this car is totally clean. And for the average car, I wouldn't disagree. But not for a $200,000 one of 20 or so built for an investment level collector. It's not apples to apples. I would do the exact same thing if this was my car. Here's a perfect example. Notice the scratches on the interior carbon fiber. For an average car, maybe somebody doesn't care. For a car like this, you have to remove that. I first did it by hand with my polishing fluid, slowly to remove the light scratches. Totally fine to do that. However, if you have a 1-inch polisher, you can also do that as well. It's much faster. Just in this case, make sure you put the pad down first before you pull on the trigger to avoid any sling on the inside of the cabin. For the Alcantara seats, which can be a little bit tricky, I first vacuum, then I spray a light mist of shag fabric clean and just agitate with an interior brush to penetrate the fibers. For the red stitching, I'm using a softer seam and stitch brush to avoid damaging the string in the process of cleaning it. I'll put a link to everything I'm using in the description, or you can just visit my website to support the show at AMMONYC.com. After 1 or 2 minutes of penetration, I use my air diffuser to lift and bring the dirt to the surface, and then at the same time lift the fibers so they look and feel brand new. The rest of the interior wasn't so bad. I just sprayed lather on a towel or directly on the surface, wiped it down, and removed the dust. For the door jambs, I used a few squirts of Boost Anti-Salt mixed with water in my pivot bottle to reach the lower parts of the door. Now, you don't always have to clean the armpits of your car, depends on where you're driving, the season, etc. But for your first clean, it's healthy to set a baseline because who knows what the previous owner did or didn't do. The interior mats really don't look that bad, but because they're black, they held way more than I expected in the steam vac reservoir when I was done. Here's my process for cleaning mats. First, I spray shag, then I tamp in the cleaner with a red brush. I give it a few minutes to work, then I use an air diffuser to lift the dirt, use degreaser and a drill brush if necessary and only necessary in those certain spots. Then I steam vac to remove all that lifted junk and degreased grime, etc. When I'm done with all of that and all the junk is in the reservoir, then I go back in with the air diffuser to help sort of dry and sort of wick the fibers quickly so it dries faster.
See, that's the difference between having black carpets and white carpets. They don't look dirty, but when you do that, it's like, ugh, that was in my new/used car. This is why we do it. Who knows what was living in there?
I repeated the same steps on the interior carpets as well.
Now we start fresh.
Now onto the paint. First, I remove the leftover glue from the paint protection film with rapid remover solvent. Because the paint is white and it's super hard to see white scratches in white paint, I'm playing with different light colors to see the damage a little bit easier. Sometimes more yellow, blue, or red can be helpful when the background isn't black against white scratches. Now the jury is still out on this process, but I'll keep you posted as I test more of this. Okay, at this point in the process, I've done about half the car and it looks fantastic. Now, I know most of you are watching the video going, great, Larry, you're cleaning a car that doesn't have mud, doesn't have swirls, it isn't pulling dead animals at that kind of thing.
The top of my head, that's why I have a shower here. It feels like things are biting.
Well, most of my business is working on super rare cars and taking it from about 90, 92% all the way up to 98%. And believe it or not, that's actually way more difficult than taking a car that's at 20% and bringing it to 90%. Huge difference in detailing techniques. This one in particular is a little bit more of a hurdle because it's white. Now, most people will look at it and say, yeah, it looks pretty good. Obviously that makes sense, black background versus white background, the scratches are white. We've talked about that ad nauseum, but the difference here is from a perfect car that looks really, really great, like concourse level versus a car that looks good, there is a difference between the two of them, and that difference in my mind is called apathy, meaning people go like, it's a white car, you don't really need to do anything. So to prove that, we're gonna be looking at the back taillight lens here. Now, the taillight lens is indicative of what the rest of the paint looks like. However, I can't catch it on camera. It's virtually impossible. Our eyes are obviously way better than the camera. So I've changed it and played with it 50 times. I just can't prove it. So I just don't want anyone thinking like, hey, he's polishing a car, doesn't need to be polished. Of course I wouldn't want to do that. I want to speed up and be more profitable and get this car out, but it's not going to work that way. I do have to polish it before putting a coating on. This lens, as you can see right here, it is just all scratched up and all swirled up. Same thing that's going on the paint. So we do need to go through this process to make that car right at 98%. For all the carbon fiber canards and the swirled out calipers, I'm using a 3-inch and 1-inch pneumatic respectively to correct the tight spots. Once done, I installed Gelée Pro wheel coating to the caliper to protect the finish and to make it easier to clean in the future. With the car up in the air, I noticed a ton of tar spots that didn't come off with soap and round one of degreaser, so I used an old wool pad on a 3-inch machine as the cleaner, knowing that I would just need to throw this pad out when I'm done. This is why it's so good to keep used pads that may not be worthy for paint use anymore. You can use them on areas like dirty wheels or underneath the car like this. Next, I clean the matte wheels, which are always a nightmare and a bit of a challenge to work on because they hold on to the brake dust much harder because of those peaks and valleys of the matte finish, meaning the brake dust gets jammed into those valleys and you can't really get it out. So you're gonna have to rely more on chemical cleaning, meaning in this case, plumb, to do all the work as opposed to mechanical, i.e. scrubbing as hard as you can, because when you scrub, you actually end up crushing or flattening out those peaks and valleys and making it just very flat, and very flat is gonna reflect the light, meaning it's going to be shiny, thus defeating the purpose of a matte finish. The bottom line is, if you have matte finish wheels, you're probably going to have to use or consume more chemical products in the process of cleaning them. With my favorite wheels now clean, dry, and coated, I went over to Steve's to get a bit of grease for the wheel hub to make removing the wheels for cleaning in the future a little bit easier, meaning they'll come on and off much easier. He recommends fluid film. Let me know if you guys know anything better than that. I also like to remove some of the heavy oxidation with a wire brush. Just take a few minutes there to make sure that the mating of the wheel and the hub when they go back on is as smooth as possible. The next day, we installed Expel paint protection film as a last-minute work order change, especially on the lower parts of the car that seem to get the rock chips and the grime buildup from the meaty tires. As I could see from underneath, that's when I polished everything. I said, oh boy, we need to protect that because this is getting beat up pretty good. Afterwards, I installed Reflex Pro over the paint and the new clear bra with no problem, and when we were done, she looked insane. Those extra steps make a substantial difference on white color cars that are hard to capture on camera, but in person, totally worth the effort. After re-cleaning the car when I got back, the ground was now covered in snow and we flatbedded the car over to Dominic's lair.
She's here.
Perfect.
What do you think, bud?
I think it looks amazing.
Crazy, right?
I don't even want to touch it. I mean, it looks absolutely
It's really
fantastic.
hard to detail white paint because you can't really see the scratches in it. So
Absolutely.
The last 1% is a big deal on this. Obviously with a little bit of clear bra.
It's amazing. It's the perfect specimen. You know, I've been chasing one for a while.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about it when we had the other black series at your shop.
Yes.
So we've been talking about it. I found this one. Got it on Bring a Trailer a couple months ago, sent it in for service.
Yeah.
It only has like 6,000 miles on it.
Crazy.
You know, not bad for 11 years old. And I had to bring it to you to get it back to perfect, or better than perfect.
There you go, sir.
Thank you, sir.
What do you got next for me?
That.
What's
have
that?
to do the Cyclone next.
Let's take a look.
That's been the biggest ask, is the paint in the Cyclone. It's been sitting for over a year since I bought it, and we've got to get her, you know, beauteous.
Looks like we're doing a Cyclone next.
As always, thanks for watching. Please subscribe and hit the notification button, and we'll see you next week.